All right. We welcome in a man that you know from one of the most amazing songs ever, by the way. And I have a side story for that I'll tell you later. Teenage Dirtbag from the band Wheatus, Mr. Brendan Brown. How are you, sir?
All right, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. So, full transparency.
Uh-huh.
When you want to do the podcast via my producer, Christian. Thank you,
Yeah.
Christian. And you said you wanted to talk either AC/DC or Iron Maiden. So I gave you three songs from each. And tell me the thought process behind picking AC/DC's Let There Be Rock.
Oh man. Well, there's a lot of good music prior to 1977 for AC/DC. Obviously you got they actually had some success too, like some hits, Jailbreak and
Dirty
Long Way
Deeds.
Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll. Dirty Deeds,
Dirty Deeds.
the whole Dirty Deeds album is pretty incredible. My favorite on that one is Ain't No Fun Waiting Around to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah.
Um, but those records are fantastic, and they have a real steady pulse to them. But it wasn't until Let There Be Rock that I think their true, like, just sizzling electrical fire was captured. I don't hear on other records what I hear on Let There Be Rock. And the other thing is I haven't heard it described too much this way, but Let There Be Rock is a punk record. Aesthetically, it exercises a lot more control than a punk record typically would, but on its tonality, it's 100%, in my opinion, 100% punk rock.
Well, I think you're right. It's a good point because they're produced by Van Ed Young, all the early stuff before they got to Highway to Hell and made the switch to Mutt Lange. So they kind of had that underground sort of quality to it. And, the Young brothers kind of came from not really a punk background, but kind of ish, I guess they're from being down in Australia. But it's interesting because I haven't heard a lot of people mention that. But when you think about it, this song specifically too, I think there is definitely a punk vibe to it for sure.
Right. Proto-punk, you could call it, I guess, maybe. You're keeping in mind that a lot of if you talk about the New York Dolls or anything that was identified as punk prior to this era that we're talking about right here, it was very sort of glam stuff, very campy. And that's fantastic. I love all that stuff. But AC/DC was a sort of like just got home from work band,
Yeah.
And they were doing what they were doing, with the exception of Angus's Dress Up, which is just got home from school
Yeah.
band. Their aesthetic was way more sort of just dirty and haphazard, which is one of the reasons I always loved them all through the 80s, because they never went hair metal. They never did anything like that.
No, I mean, there's a few bands that have pretty much stuck to their guns through their whole career in the heavy world. There's not a lot of them. There's, AC/DC for sure, Slayer, and probably not too many more. Others have taken, veered in different directions here and there, but AC/DC's always stayed true to themselves, which is, I mean, part of their genius, right? That they've done that. And it's interesting too, the punk thing. That's a really interesting angle that I never really thought about, but it makes sense because also this came out in 1977, which is kind of, when the thing was happening in London with the Pistols, that sort of stuff. So it's kind of around the same time. And I just wonder, because when you think, you can equate this more being a musician. I'm not. But it's interesting when people start to make music, especially way back then, where this is the early days of heavy music, where the influences come from. Because obviously, you have the punk scene in the Pistols in the UK, and then AC/DC's in Australia. At that point, I don't think they'd gotten to the UK yet. I could be wrong though. But
I think they had just begun to move up there and get out of Australia.
It was around that same time. So it's kind of interesting that all these kind of things blend through. I'm just fascinated by the punk rock thing, because I never really thought about AC/DC as with that element in it. But now that you mention it, and especially this song, because this is a very heavy, edgy song. It's also fast. We've been talking a lot about kind of the origins of speed metal stuff. And we talked about Exciter by Judas Priest, and then we also talked about Foghat, and there had some elements of that going on too. And this is all in 1978. And then this song, which isn't really it's not like speed metal fast, like drum wise, but that guitar riff, obviously, it's a pretty fast song and pretty fast beat as well.
Sure. And it also is one of two, what I refer to as the AC/DC long form songs where Angus can take a solo live.
Yeah.
This is one of them. Whole Lot of Rosie is the other one on Let There Be Rock. Both like became, absolute mainstays in the live show. And they also, you're talking about the origin of things and the influences. There's a lot of Chuck Berry, obviously, in AC/DC all the time, a lot of Albert King. But I feel on this record like a Screamin' Jay Hawkins kind of thing. Like absolutely ripping, Little Richard kind of like we're gonna tear this microphone to shreds, and
you could throw some Jerry Lee Lewis in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels like the preamps on whatever console they are on are just pinned in the red, like just absolutely pinned in the red. Distorted guitar, yes, but then distorting everything else on top of that. And Angus cuts into his solos on this record, and they have this extra little like top tier fuzz that's happening that is, I believe, not a part of his signal, but rather what he's pushing through on the recording equipment of the time. Like he's basically kind of breaking the console,
Yeah, I'm sure.
And that they left it like that the choice was made to leave it like that was right for them is pretty amazing, because they were beginning at this time to approach their records in almost an R&B way. The follow-up to this, Powerage, is almost an R&B record.
Mm-hmm.
And then Highway to Hell with Mutt Lange, their sort of like first real sonic maturity moment, I think, still has that crispy top end on those solos, right? Like absolutely sizzling bacon. But the rest of the recording is much the drum and bass, and rhythm guitar is much more in that Mutt Lange school of like, no, we're going to organize this and clean it up. It's going to be warmer. It's going to be more thumpy. It's going to be like R&B. So to me, AC/DC always had a rhythm section that came from 1950s rockabilly, soul, Motown, a discipline. The discipline of Motown on the rhythm section for AC/DC is profound. People don't really talk about this either, that they orchestrate the chords in the music, because the bass is doing one thing, Malcolm's doing another, and Angus is doing another. They create a piano chord across those three elements many, many times. And it's very difficult to arrange music like that. And there's this myth that AC/DC is just like simple, meat and potatoes, and that's a bunch of fucking bullshit. I still don't know what's going on in the harmonies of the verses of Back in Black, for instance. Yeah. There's a movement there on the chords that's subtly different each time. That's like, did I just hear what? Play that again, and it's not possible to summarize them in that way, because they were paying attention as early as this record to those orchestrations, right? At the same time that there's this disciplined school of R&B, Motown, and early rock and roll. By the way, Chuck Berry's band, Little Richard's band, those are the best musicians who were alive at the time, man. Mm-hmm. They were like, those were like real studio jazz cats who were playing this stuff very, very well. And then when you get into the Motown era with the Temptations and the doo-wop groups, AC/DC borrowed tons and tons of truly disciplined backbeat R&B techniques from between Phil Rudd, and on this record it's Mark Evans, but then later on it's Cliff, right? So so that is something that the two new guys are still working on, that very specific discipline. I just saw them in Tennessee in May, and it's still, I can still tell that it requires a ton of rehearsal to get those feels right.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I've said this for years. I mean, Phil Rudd is one of the best rock and roll drummers of all time. Period. I mean, there's no question. He's phenomenal at what he does, and Yes, he plays simple, but it's not as simple as you think. I've talked to
Mm,
drummers about some of the stuff that he does, and they're like, "That's a really hard song to play." Even something as simple as like, "You Shook Me All Night Long." The
no.
beat, because it's again, it's a little bit off, and there's not a lot of stuff that AC/DC's did a little bit off. But we've talked to Dave Lombardo on the show, and I've talked about him about his drumming stuff because he's the best metal drummer in my
Mhm.
opinion. And he mentioned a lot about jazz and how jazz had a big influence on him growing up. And that's become a recurring theme, which, for me as a longtime metalhead, and I've studied the history and, all these sort of things. And we always go back to, of course, it all came from the blues, and that's what's the origins of it, and a lot of classical influences. But I never realized as much how jazz has such a huge influence on metal. And a lot of it is because of the drumming and the swing of the drums and how the drums are played. And it's really fascinating to go back and listen to it now. I'm like, oh, I hear it now. I get it. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, and Angus and Malcolm learned from rock and roll records, and those rock and
Yeah.
roll records are recorded by jazz musicians, right?
Yep.
Like really, really skilled and seasoned jazz musicians who were playing the pop format of the time, which was rock and roll songs. But Chuck Berry's band, those guys could they all had to come up through jazz. It's just the way that it was. There's a little video I like to find on YouTube of Malcolm talking about drummers. And Malcolm, in my opinion, I don't know this for certain, but it seems to me that he had much more of a hand in the organization of the songs than you would think.
Malcolm pretty much was the driving force behind AC/DC. Not only musically, he was the one really coming up with most of the riffs and really writing the songs, and the other guys were coming to help. But he ran the band. He was their manager. He was he was everything. He was. You'd never know that from just, he's just a little guy on stage and he doesn't get a lot of credit, but he was really the one that was driving everything. He was writing everything. He was basically managing the band. He was AC/DC pretty much.
Yeah. In this video, he's talking about drummers, right? And he's talking about how the hi-hat is played. And he says, in his way, nobody swings anymore, like he's like, and he's talking about the rockabilly and skiffle drummers of the 50s. And he's talking about how they put the hi-hat early, right? And then catch up on the time on the snare. So, right? And then he compares it to modern drumming, which is very tick, tick, poke, tick, 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 poke, tick, 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 poke, right? And it's got a static, kind of boring, monotonous feel where the way that the hi-hat was used. Now, if you listen to Phil Rudd play anything on any AC/DC record, there's this super peculiar, very difficult to emulate separation in time between what's happening on the hi-hat, what's happening on the snare, and then the kick drum is its own thing, of course, differently. And you get into a song like they had Simon Wright doing that technique as part of their motif on Who Made Who, right? Yep. You get into even records that Phil's not on. It's still that formula. It's still Malcolm or Angus calling those shots and saying, "No, man, it's got to be like, to the point where Who Made Who is one of the stranger ones. I could talk about that in a separate episode, but they have this. He has this finger picking thing where he starts on the that kind of thing, and it's really difficult to do because he's finger picking it like. He's just kind of slipping it in, right? And go ahead, try to play along to that. I don't care how good a guitarist you are. Go ahead, try to play along to that, man. It's like
you're 100% right, and I've talked to all musicians that are involved in our world are obviously massive AC/DC fans, and we had a fun one with Scott Ian talking about Sin City, which is
Sin City,
just an amazing song, and especially I wanted Scott on because we're both Powers is both of our favorite AC/DC records, so that helped. But also, he's an interesting guy because he was so influenced by Malcolm, because Malcolm was basically a rhythm guitar player, and that's pretty much what Scott does. And Scott, of course, gleaned a lot of stuff off of Malcolm, and kind of took what he did and made it his in Anthrax, which I thought was really interesting because you don't have a lot of just rhythm guitar players anymore. Like everybody's dual leads and stuff now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and Scott is there's backbeat in Anthrax music, and I'm guessing now that you're telling me this is Scott is there for that. It's a funny little anecdote. Jack Slade Chris Slade's son is a drummer, fantastic drummer himself, and he's a friend of mine. And we chat sometimes, text and stuff. And he invited me to the Axel DC show at Madison Square Garden in 2016, I think it was. And I was a skeptic. I was a little concerned about how it would go. I was floored. Axel absolutely crushed that show. He behaved like a surrogate Bon and Brian at the same time. You could tell he, at some point, in my opinion, I guess, it would mattered so much to Axel that he get that music right. That it.
Oh no, yeah, he's a massive fan. He's a massive AC/DC fan. That's why he took it so seriously. I wasn't really necessarily into it as much, but I didn't go see it live. And a few people, like my buddy Chris Jericho, was going on and on saying that he crushed it.
I was there with Jericho. It was Jericho
there
was
you go.
sitting with us. Yeah, and,
there you go.
And I mean, he absolutely crushed it, and I was so relieved and so grateful that Axel brought that music back to me in that moment, because I need to see them every once in a while. You know what I mean? I really need to see AC/DC, and that's the one of the coolest shows there ever will be, I think, to grace a stage. But we were talking backstage for the first time ever. Way too nervous to even look at the real guys. Angus and Malcolm, I wasn't even going to go near them, right? And luckily they didn't come through into the meet and greet, but Chris Slade did, and he was like iconic to me in the way that he's the first drummer to be showcased with the double kick drums for Thunderstruck and all that stuff.
I mean, Thunderstruck, one of the best songs ever. Yeah,
but the question I had for him, I was like, how the fuck do you keep that hi-hat action through the whole entire Let There Be Rock? Because it's tick, 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 for 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how are you, what are the exercises? How do you warm up? How is that sustainable? This guy's in his 60s, man. Might even be in his 70s at this point. He's still completely fucking floored the shit out of that song. And I thought to myself, there has to be something he knows about how to maintain his muscular health, right? It's got to be some kind of secret. And I said, how do you maintain that? How do you hold it up? And he goes, oh, it's just back to my jazz training. Yeah. And I thought, okay, there you go. Obviously there's something about taking it all the way back to jazz for AC/DC. By the way, I'm wearing a Rush hoodie as well. This is a Hold Your Fire hoodie, tour hoodie. And you're wearing my. I have two favorites. That's the Hemispheres shirt.
Yep.
But I have I have faves in the '80s too. We can get into another podcast there. But So Let There Be Rock for me, if getting back onto topic, was obviously got the record when I was a kid. Maybe I was 12 or 11 or somewhere in that vicinity. Beginning to collect AC/DC records, beginning to fill in the gaps in their timeline, got to this one and really got stuck playing along to it for months, maybe even a year and a half. Just exclusively Whole Lotta Rosie, Let There Be Rock, and Problem Child. Those three from this album, for me, were like heavy rotation to the point where it drove my mom nuts. It's just like blasting this shit. Playing along to it as best I could, getting it wrong, but beginning to understand what these shapes were on the guitar that he's making, And I know you know this, but it was damn near impossible to find video of them doing this back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Wasn't until the Midnight Special when they went on in, I think, 70... forgetting 78. What was that? I can't remember the Midnight Special, but I remember begging my mom to let me stay up late because the Midnight Special was on at midnight. That's one, and it's the first time AC/DC was on.
Sure,
and they did Sin City, so it must have been 78. It might have been 79, but nonetheless,
probably 78 or 79.
Yeah. But first time I ever seen, I hadn't seen any video of them or ever seen them before, because before then, there's stuff that's come out now from in England and whatnot on YouTube, but we didn't have that back then. So first time finally seeing them, and it was everything I wanted it to be. Seeing them live on Midnight Special, just phenomenal.
Yeah, but I wanted to know what he was doing, right? So like trying to find video of that, it's like, it didn't exist, right? It was
not
like
back then.
No. I mean, and it's pre-internet. We're talking, 80, maybe 84, 85. CD players are brand new.
Yep.
I got it on CD. You know, it was like a big deal. And they came in these fucking ludicrous, like
Long boxes. Yep.
yeah, long boxes.
Famous long boxes.
Yeah. And I remember just realizing that this simple thing, this. You know, just was you had to maintain a steadiness of your hand that wasn't, no, it wasn't complicated, but the steadiness of hand was actually complicated because it's do pat do pat do pat do, and you're in between do pat do pat do pat do pat do. You know, and it's just if you're not ready to squeeze that shit until your fucking nose pops off, you know, then you can't play that song. And it took me weeks to figure out how to develop that muscular intensity in my wrist and in my hands, and of course I'm just jumping around like a lunatic trying to look like Angus at the same time, which was fucking stupid. But you know, I was 12 years old. You know, I was like figuring it out, and it just opened up and a whole lot of Rosie. But I remember this thing happened. You know the part when they goes to bust into right? My grandmother came into the room. She's a Depression kid, you know, Depression era child. She was born in 1917. And she came into the room dancing the Lindy when she heard that part of that song. And I realized this goes back. This goes way back.
Way back.
This is actually a biblical rock song. You know, this is you've got my grandmother dancing in here, you know? And she didn't know what AC/DC, you know,
sure.
She didn't know that from whatever, but she thought it sounded like Chuck Berry, and she thought it reminded her of the Andrews Sisters, and she thought it reminded her of Benny Goodman, and it was like, this is an incredibly musically educated piece of music right here. This is like, has history built into it, and it's a piece of breakthrough contemporary slash your fucking tires wide open punk rock shit, you know? So, it merged the generations in that moment for me, and became this thing that like I don't go more than a month without listening to something from this record.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's so good. And I've learned on this podcast that I always go back to the studio versions of these songs when I think about them. But that's not fair because there are live versions. And I discovered this when I had my buddy, legendary funny car driver, Ron Capps on, and he wanted to talk about Victim of Changes by Judas Priest. So I immediately go back to the studio version, which I absolutely love and one of my favorite songs ever. And we start talking, and he's like, no, I'm talking about the live album, Unleashed in the East. Like, that's where I first heard them because he's a little bit younger. So he wasn't even familiar with the studio version as much as the live version. So we do have to talk about the live version because it is a phenomenal live record. If you want blood,
you're talking, if you want blood, yeah. So
and this song obviously is on there in the elongated version.
Sure, that's where you think to yourself, I have to see this. Like, and you hear the crowd responding to things that you can't see, right? He's doing stuff. Angus is doing stuff. And he's pulling his pants down and mooning the crowd, or he's maybe doing some sort of striptease or something. But maybe he's up on a platform and the spotlight is hitting him where he's going to. You know, he does that whole piece of the solo there, which I just completely botched. But you know what I'm saying? It's like that is your eyes are following. You're watching. I had it on tape, cassette tape as well, because obviously you got to have it for the car, right?
Yeah,
it's prior to CD players in the car. Obviously, this is 1980. So you I'm watching the tape go by and going, and the crowd just goes nuts, and you know that you're missing something. You know that there's something else going
on.
Yeah. So that was the birth of needing to see them, and you know, I didn't have any access to tickets at Madison Square Garden or you know, freaking Nassau Coliseum or anything. I didn't know how to find out if they were coming, you know, or just listen to the radio and find out if it's happening, you know, all that stuff. It was you could not search it. You just could not search it. And got very lucky when in my freshman year of high school, I had just turned 14 years old, and a few upperclassmen whose parents my mother knew and begged to let me tag along, brought me to Madison Square Garden. So there was no parents, 14 years old, Madison Square Garden, AC/DC on the Blow Up Your Video tour. Interestingly,
what year was that? 80?
Is 80, I think it was 88. I think it was Christmas
gotcha.
88. Or it might have been Christmas 89. I'm really not sure. But no, it was Christmas 88. No, hold on. I started school in 87. Yeah, I think it was actually, might have been 87. Anyway, it's the White Lion opened up, right? White Lion opened up the show. It was probably 88. And they, I was just remember being like trembling, thinking that I was in the same room as him, you know, like that we're in the same building. Like, what the fuck? He's actually here, you know,
right?
Like that. Those feelings of just being completely overwhelmed, and actually being like a little bit obnoxious about like, you know, not wanting to be distracted from it, you know, like being so focused on it that I was probably annoying to the other older kids I was with, you know, had to be. So. Yeah,
you and everybody else in the crowd.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you know, I was lucky enough. I did get to see them one time with Bond in '79.
Man,
they played Long Beach Arena on the Highway to Hell tour, which was amazing, and of course Bond was phenomenal. But I was a bootlegger back then, I would sneak tape recorders into the shows and tape them. And that's the only show that I went to where it was so loud it broke my tape recorder. I only have like 20 minutes of that show on tape, and then it broke it because it was so loud. That's probably the loudest show I've ever been to, and I've seen Manowar, so I think AC/DC at that point was even louder than them. But Bond was just everything you'd want him to be. It was so great that I got to see him at least one time.
Yeah, the times I've seen them, I saw them when I said when I was 14. I saw them and then the next time I saw them was in 2002. They played Roseland Ballroom.
Oh wow!
Yeah, White Lion opened for AC/DC during the 1988. Yeah, that was
1988. There you go.
Got it. So Roseland was this moment where they were. Oh, by the way, Malcolm was not on that tour. That was the first time Stevie subbed in on the Blow Up Your Video tour.
Oh, interesting.
So the first time I saw them, it was Stevie on rhythm, and you couldn't tell he's smoking. Like he just
he's still
still dead.
It's in the genes.
It really is. It really is. But they just were so good. And then after that, caught them at Roseland Ballroom because we were on the same label.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I've had my luck with it. Yeah.
Why were they playing Roseland though?
Well, I think they had just signed their catalog over to Sony Music, and we were signed to Sony Music for all of 5 minutes from 2000 to 2003. So my A&R guy called me, and he's like, "You like AC/DC, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, they're playing tonight. You want tickets?" I was like, "Do not give those tickets to anybody else. I'm coming right now." I freaking got there, and they opened with my favorite AC/DC song, hands down across the board, which is on this record, "Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be."
Oh yeah, phenomenal.
And I took my earplugs out for that. Standing behind the soundboard, you could really get close in Roseland. It was just a tiny little fence.
Like I said, why were they playing such a small venue? Was it a gig for Sony or something?
They had just signed over their catalog to Sony, and it was like a Sony party or something.
Gotcha, that makes sense. I never got to see them in anything other than arenas and now stadiums, obviously.
Well, I saw them in a 2,500 capacity club, man.
I'll just jump in because I was looking it up because that's crazy. I guess it was when they got inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so they decided to do, I guess, a free show. But the way you're talking about it, Brendan, it was free for people that were invited, I guess.
Yeah. It was really special.
But because I mean, I still lived in New York then, so I was like, wait, how did I not even know about this? Well, I wouldn't have been able to go. That's why.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll let you guys give it.
Yeah, I was absolutely freaking out. And the crazy thing about this night is that I met this kid called Craig Hecht who approached me out of nowhere and said, "Are you the singer from Wheatus?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, at the time, I thought maybe I was going to get punched, And he turned out to be best friends with a bass player called Matthew, who's my bass player now, has been with me for 20 years. So it was like this weird, serendipitous thing.
Nice.
And I had backstage passes that night as well. That was the first time I had backstage passes to them. And I was in the meet and greet room, and I saw the door to the dressing room swing open, and Angus and Malcolm were not there yet, but Cliff was walking towards it, and Cliff came out a few moments later, and then the door swung back open, and there was Angus and Malcolm like walking behind him, and I went, I'm out of here, and I left. I couldn't do it because what do you say to him? I was you for Halloween in 1985 and 1986. Like how do you even like, I don't want to know him that way. At all.
Every other kid, I totally get it. I've never met any of them other than Brian, and I only met Brian because my good friend Jim Brewer, who we did a record with, and Brian actually sang on that record.
No shit.
Go check it out. Yep.
That's so cool.
Songs from the Garage, Jim Brewer. It's a really fun record, and Brian sang when he was out of AC/DC for that brief period of time.
Right.
So in the studio, Brian came in and did the track, and he just didn't want anybody else there. He said, "I get it." So I left. But Jim's like, "Oh, we'll call you back, when he's ready, so you can say a quick hello." So that'd be amazing. So they call, and I just was like 5 minutes away from the studio. So they called me and they go, "Okay, he's leaving. You got to come back." So we raced back. He literally we saw the taillights of his car leaving. So Jim felt so bad. He invited me when they played Dodger Stadium to come see the band and meet Brian. So I'm like, oh, cool. So I knew Brian was a nice guy. I mean, Jim has known him for years, and he's a super cool guy. But
he
I didn't
seems like a lovely guy. Brian.
Oh, he was great. But I didn't.
So happy to be alive, and
Yeah, I didn't want to talk music or anything. So I go, okay, he's a big car guy. I'm a big Indy car and F1 fan, and so we basically talk racing. It's pretty funny. I said, so who's your favorite F1 driver? He's like, I think he's Sebastian Vettel. Like, this is back when Lewis Hamilton was the guy. I said, not Lewis Hamilton. He's like, fuck Lewis Hamilton. I'm like, holy shit. Yeah, he has opinions about stuff, but he was great. We actually watched the concert from his wife's suite at Dodger Stadium, so that was pretty amazing. That's my only
cool.
AC/DC getting near them story. Like I said, I do know they're super nice guys. One of the bands that we've worked with, King's X, was out on the road with them.
Oh, I love King's X. Tour. I love that
great
band.
The best people band. And yeah, so amazing. But they were out on the road, and they would say, like, yeah, those guys would just come in and hang out in bars, and nobody knew who they were. And so they were super cool, and like down to earth, treated them really well. So it's like, okay, good. I like to hear that.
You love a story like that. I figure you can't be as consistent and sustainable as they've been and still be a jerk. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look,
possible.
I mean, this. I mean, I would say I'm lucky to be in this industry because 97% of all the people in this world are all great people, but whether it's managers or agents or band members, and everybody's pretty cool. Everybody pretty much gets along. There's always outliers here and there, but you're right. You cannot be successful and be in a business like this for that amount of time and not be at least reasonable human beings, which I've heard
I think you're right. I hope you're right about that.
Yeah. I've heard it. Like I said, I don't know them, but I've heard enough around them, and people have worked with them. It's really good, and they're still touring, which kind of shocked me. They just announced this U.S. tour now, which I pretty much thought the last one, that's going to be it. They're going to be done. I heard rumors about that, and then all of a sudden, boom! Here's another whole U.S. tour next year, and they're coming to Las Vegas again, which makes me very happy.
Man, I'll keep coming around if they do. I don't have to have my arm twisted on that. I told my band, I was like, listen, if they ever come back around, we're doing this as a field trip. You cannot go through life at a time when they're on the planet with you and not see this,
And it's still pretty good too. I was a little worried at first because I was at the power trip disaster in the desert, and it was so horrible. I actually left after the first day. It was probably the worst experience I've ever had at a concert. It was so horrifically horribly run. It was just everything was a complete nightmare. And I spent a lot of money for what I thought were really, really good tickets. And I get there and I'm watching Iron Maiden from 1,000 miles away. They're like ants. And it was,
there's lots of scams out there, man, these days. The videos I've seen of that AC/DC sounded great, but
yeah, they didn't look good though. I know Angus has supposedly been going through some health issues at that point, but they were just a little bit like, not sure about this. But then they did the European tour and I saw videos like, oh, it's really good. And then I was lucky to see them twice on this last tour. I saw them in Dallas and here in Vegas. And both times they were awesome. And I mean, the Vegas show, I mean, Angus is running around the stage the whole night. Like
Yeah,
running
man.
around and playing really good.
I don't.
I was
I
like
can't
amazed.
believe he can. I mean, like, wait, at the Tennessee show, Nashville, last May. Matthew, our bass player, who I met through that show, and our booking agent Alex was there with his wife and my girlfriend Gabrielle and Joey, one of our backing vocalists, and we were all just like, you gotta be kidding me. I can't believe these old dudes are
Yeah.
doing this. Like, this is insane. How are they doing this? And, I remember this one moment. Alex and Matthew are younger than I am by about 20 years almost, generally, roughly 20 years, 15, 20 years. And they opened with If You Want Blood, You Got It, which is another one of my favorites.
Yep, same
But
here.
I think I don't check the data on this, but I think they dropped Back in Black second, right?
Might have been. They changed the set list a little bit, but it's a great set list. It's interesting you mentioned going with people a bit younger, because I went to the Dallas show with a couple of friends of mine who were late 20s, early 30s, and their reaction was really interesting. And then I went to the one in Vegas with my buddy Kerry King, and so it's two different dynamics. Both
You're just your buddy Kerry King. Don't think I didn't catch that one, man.
He is. I've known him for
That's
4
so
million
cool.
years. So,
That's so fucking cool.
But
That's
we
awesome.
hang a lot. He's an awesome dude. But it's just interesting getting different perspectives from guys that are like 30, that the first time they ever seen AC/DC, and then going with veterans. So it's fun.
for Matthew and for Alex, who are much younger than me, they looked at each other when they dropped Back in Black second, and they went flex, And I was like, you guys have no idea. Like, these guys can fucking do anything they want, and stadium's full, and this is like another level of like, no one sees this level of the industry, if you can even call it that, because it's not the industry, it's a fucking AC/DC show, right? It's like it's like its own thing, it's got its own tier, and up there with Rush and bands like that, like the Rolling Stones, but this is the real thing, this is like
and it still boggles my mind how massively huge they are. So my buddy Rob Caggiano, who played guitar in Anthrax and Volbeat, he actually produced the Jim Brewer record, and he went the night before Brian came to the studio. He and Brewer went down to Brian's house and had dinner with him. So he was telling me some stories, and Rob's like, yeah, I'm out with this band Volbeat, where we're playing like whatever the stadium is in Denmark. It's like 75,000 people. And I was like, that's nice, mate. We're playing all these places like 180,000 stadiums. It's insane. It wasn't bragging. He was just kind of just saying it off the cuff, and he's thinking to himself, my God, they're playing these massive gigs that, like, I don't know anybody else could go out and in one night have 170 or 180,000 people at an AC/DC show, not like just a festival.
Yeah, but back to the point, it's always about songs. We can discuss the stamina and whether or not you can uphold the kind of entertainment quality over the years, and I think that they definitely have. But what it really is down to is just like, they have songs. They have 25 or 30 songs, right?
Yep.
Who the fuck has that? I mean, like, who has that? Like, that's a whole 3 or 4 albums worth of familiarity, and to span decades like they have. Like, they did pretty well in the 70s. They had some breakthroughs. They owned the 80s because they opened it with like the biggest selling metal record of all time.
Yep.
And then they came back right at the drop of the grunge needle for Thunderstruck, and they've done something similar a few times since. In fact, Shot in the Dark is one of my favorite singles. Like,
that whole album's amazing.
It's killer, man. It's absolutely like iconic, canon AC/DC music coming out 4 or 5 decades after the whole fact. And I just like, I can't. It's just an inspiration to me that I almost have to go see it just to experience the fact that it's real and that it's possible, and that I should work harder and be better at my craft and all that stuff, because it's like, holy shit, man, these guys, they couldn't find an excuse if their lives depended on it. Not what I mean? It's just killer, man. It's killer.
100%. Well, dude, I can't thank you enough for doing this. That was amazing, and we could probably talk forever here, but the Pantheon people won't like me to do that. So, so thanks for doing this, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Anytime. If you want to go in depth, I got riffs. I know how to play this stuff still.
Awesome.
Like 12-year-old me. You know, that's
Awesome.
it.
Well, you can't leave yet because we have to upload the
Oh,
thing. So.
and Brian, you wanted to tell your story, the
Oh
teenage
yeah, my
dirtbag
funny.
story?
So my.
Yeah, so let me pop out and stop talking, so and I'll
Oh,
put
you
it
can
back
stay
in.
in there. You can stay in there. It's a good story. So, my girlfriend's daughter just turned 13, and my girlfriend loves that song "Teenage Dirtbag." So the whole theme of her party was "Teenage Dirtbag." She like wrote it everywhere, and they did the whole theme around the song and some of the lyrics. They played the song 1,000 times. So, and they all had a good time. So when he told me that you want to do the podcast, I was like, oh, that's great. It's kind of funny that just came up because that was probably 2 weeks before he asked for you to do it. I go, oh, all right, cool, that'd be great. So anyway, so it's still out there, still affecting people. So
that's so cool, man. Please give her a high five for us and express our gratitude. We are continually shocked and surprised in the best way by the ongoing, I don't know, concern for the song, I guess. Like people really are making it a point to have it in their lives for the long run, and we feel so lucky.
Well, you mentioned songs before, and it's great songs live on, just like you said earlier. So it makes sense.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll tell her. She was very excited. I told her that you were going to be on the podcast. She's like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, back to the Iron Maiden thing. Just to make this point, Iron Maiden the words have really good vowels for Teenage Dirtbag, right? They fit absolutely perfectly. Really easy to sing. I had considered putting AC/DC in there, but it's a little bit more staccato, and I don't think it would have been as big of a chorus.
Correct.
So it's really like, and it's not as though I wasn't, trying. It's not like I didn't have that going on. It's important to note that I was a huge and am a huge Iron Maiden fan, but AC/DC won my heart first, and it's down to them and Rush for me. And frankly, I think they're not really comparable bands in terms of music, but AC/DC will always be my favorite rock and roll band 100 times out of 100. And
my trajectory was Kiss was my first favorite band, then AC/DC was my favorite band, and then Iron Maiden. And Iron Maiden still is